have a little bit of a mix-up today. We have a nice panel discussion this afternoon, but first thing we're going to do is have an introduction to BSI with Shai and Khilan. So if you two wouldn't mind coming up, please. We're going to start with a few slides before going into the discussion.
Is this mic? Is it working? Okay, yes. Perfect. So good morning, everyone. So my name is Shai. I'm a data specialist for BSI. And today we're going to have a panel basically looking at the future of work and AI's role in that future and the workplace. So just moving across, we surveyed just under 1,000 business leaders, and basically we were looking to focus into what the priorities were for individuals, their career development, and priorities for businesses to succeed and see where they overlap. The two biggest trends there was maintaining health and well-being, both on an individual level and of course across the organization, and as well flexibility in the workplace. None of us are shy to the recent, or no longer recent, but to the COVID, of course. And so those were the two biggest trends into people's priorities on the workplace.
So I'm sure everyone here knows a bit about AI, machine learning, data science, all these buzzwords. But I hope we all kind of, from that, know and understand AI is not like a magic wand we can wave at society's problems. We are facing some key challenges, so people are living longer, the workforce is shrinking. But I'm hopeful we can have an open discussion here, both with the panel and kind of getting all of you guys involved, into how we could utilize technology to challenge and solve some of these problems, and potentially to more fulfilling work lives as well. Thank you.
Can you hear me? There we go. Brilliant. Thanks for that. That was a great intro. Good to see a really nice, busy audience today. Thank you for all coming. My name's Tia. I'm going to be your host for this afternoon. I'm the Director of Data and Information Services over at Gallagher. We're an insurer. And I will be hosting today's panel. I think probably the best place to start is if we go down the line and do some introductions. Tell us where you're working and a little bit about your career to date so far. Shai, do you want to kick off?
Yes, so my name's Shai. I've come from a background initially in software, and I've pivoted over to data. So I'm at BSI, which stands for the British Standards Institution, in their group marketing department. And as I said before, I'm a data specialist. And right now we're looking at the way of driving AI for good. That is our main focus.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Marta. I'm hoping to bring a little bit, maybe slightly different perspective today because I come from the talent acquisition world. I've been in recruitment for over 20 years, mostly spent in talent acquisition in tech space, but also consulting and retail. And more recently, I've been running my own company focusing specifically on career development and executive level coaching. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Hi, I'm Leila. I'm Chief Data Officer of Digitas, the unicorn booth downstairs. I have been a Chief Data Officer now for a while, but I've been working in data my whole career. I've been very fortunate to work originally in Australia, that's my accent, New York, Paris, and now here in the UK.
So I'm Khilan. I'm a data scientist at BSI and I work on the innovation team. We're looking to kind of utilize technology to make standards themselves more accessible.
Fantastic. Right. Well, I'll kick off into the questions. If anyone's got anything in the audience that they want to send in, by all means, scan the QR code and they'll come through digitally to us and we'll add them to the conversation. Starting off, can you tell us what inspired you to start a career in data?
Well, so that's a very interesting question. So for me, my career in data was, I guess, wanting to leverage more than just initially developing software. So I love tech and I wanted to go into software development, but I felt that data had better potential in what it could do. And I wanted to be in a position contributing to leveraging data, using it to innovate and just drive positive change.
I can pitch in a bit. So originally I feel like my kind of interest in data came from actually uni itself, because utilizing data for experiments and it was just chucking models together, and then data itself is kind of an extension of that. So data science, just kind of playing with data and just view it as a continuation.
Fantastic, fantastic. Leila, any thoughts?
I like numbers. I don't particularly like words. I liked the logic, the problem solving, and I liked maths.
Excellent. So obviously the last few years has seen a massive acceleration in interest in AI. Can you give me some examples of where you're seeing it applied in your own workplace, what you're excited about, and where you're beginning to see those impacts?
Yes, so definitely. I think the biggest impact of recent that I can go to is actually BSI's website. So when we launched our new UK website just at the end of December last year, to actually, what we were trying to do is reduce the irrelevant traffic, should we say, that goes to the website. So one of the phases of doing that was actually crawling the website and trying to identify these pages that weren't relevant or was pulling in irrelevant traffic. And we used AI to do that, and then we actually reduced our web footprint from 6,500 to just over 1,000 pages. So we really condensed it down into, I guess, BSI's, their message, and made sure it's all targeted and relevant. Obviously cleaned up the web page and just made it a lot more aesthetically pleasing. So that's probably the most recent, biggest case I've seen myself.
Okay, and you look like you're about to jump in there.
Sure. I was going to mention a little bit of some of the work that actually Shusma here has been working on with like environmental health and safety regulation. So there's a consulting division within BSI, and they use this regulation and specifically down to like the state and local level in the US. So essentially a tooling to look at that kind of regulation data and see what's relevant to the person that's integrating, so the consultant themselves. So they can kind of filter down and then essentially have a LLM based off the top of that. So basically generatively search through and create answers based on regulation, because having to kind of manually trawl through all of that regulation, see what's relevant and interpret it is kind of a big cognitive overhead. So the capability to do that in this way is also really beneficial and can make a big difference.
Fantastic, fantastic. Marta, I know we've seen a lot of shift in terms of interviewing, CV sifting. What are you seeing in the kind of HR and talent acquisition space?
Yeah, I need to say that I probably maybe before I start, perhaps just to make a distinction between, what are the automation tools and then what are the Gen AI tools, because I think a lot of the conversations are using those two concepts basically almost as equal. So if I think about companies hiring, especially the large corporate environments where they can perhaps be a little bit more ahead of the curve. So automation has been around for years, right? And things like, for example, CRM tools, filtering and sifting through CVs, looking for keywords and maybe ranking those CVs that meet the job criteria a little bit higher. That's been around for years. But probably more recently, an example, video interviewing tools where before you even interact with a human being, you actually are asked to answer a number of questions, record yourself, and then specific technology is actually analyzing your answers, taking notes from that, and then you may get rejected, or you may actually get moved forward to the next step. And these all tools are basically introduced to enhance the candidate experience, but also provide a little bit more efficient and I guess, faster process for all parties involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of, we've just also touched upon some of the more nitty-gritty detail that you need to get into to make these technologies work. Where are you seeing the biggest challenges in implementing these?
Sure. I think I've seen it within BSI itself as mainly the metadata and the data around it. So say if you have that kind of multimodal data, so you have interviews from the clients themselves, that's not clients, sorry, but the candidates. And it's about how do you then pass through that data, feed it through and try and generate insights from those to see what would make a good candidate and what wouldn't. So I think it's kind of that challenge in seeing, so you may have the transcripts from the interview that took place, you could even feed in some of the confidence or facial information about it as well. Again, it's being careful about that data because there may be risks of things like discrimination, so you need to make sure any of the design of a lot of these applications, you've considered all of these. And then filtering it through to kind of like a final feature layer and seeing if there are those insights you can then make during the hiring process and working with the SMEs during that.
Leila?
I think as well, just from the CDO level, we're seeing quite a lot of people not understanding that, implementing AI solutions is not ChatGPT. So we're seeing like a lot of CEOs, a lot of boards, a lot of senior stakeholders thinking that you can just kind of push a button and all of a sudden you're getting value from AI or Gen AI. And actually a lot of the difficulty that we're seeing is just getting people to recognize and understand that it's not something that you can get value from tomorrow. It does require investment, it does require people, it does require kind of a lot of real technical implementation to be able to extract value from it. But I think that's less on the technical side and more on the people's perceptions of how easy this should be.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I'd like to kind of explore that a little bit. How are you having those conversations with some of those stakeholders? And because it is an education piece, you know, and sometimes people have, as you say, these kind of preconceived notions that you just press a button and it's really easy to do. How are you taking them through that process of learning?
I wish I had a magic answer to this. I don't. So if anyone does, come and see me afterwards. I think it's just about simplifying what the kind of impact and value is, as opposed to just kind of bucketing everything into Gen AI or AI and trying to take people on a journey. So I don't like the word journey, but there we are. A lot of kind of workshops and just kind of show and tells, giving people that aren't technical a space to ask perhaps silly questions, but not kind of judge them for asking that. Because the reality is, you know, we've been doing this for all of our careers, so we have such a head start to understanding how you should do this and how it should work. And we really, I think, need to be, I guess, patience, probably a good word, in kind of getting people to get up to the level that they need to really understand the intricacies. So I think it's just giving people the space and the opportunity to be inquisitive and ask questions and kind of give them answers in a way they can understand.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So in terms of, you know, when we think about the non-technical side of AI, we're looking at the legal implications, we're looking at ethical implications. How are you sort of beginning to think about these in your own businesses, in your own companies and organisations?
So I think that's actually a really good segue because of, even in the terms of AI, everyone's wondering, you know, what is next for AI? Where's it going to go? And I think how it's addressed will be a big part of whether AI remains in its current place or how it grows. And that comes down to, in a big part, regulation and freedom. You know, the BSI is one of the probably first in the market in terms of the private sector, trying to drive this by introducing our AI regulation, trying to make sure that businesses are using AI as a force for good, and ethically following the practices within the AI space, which we would do for anything, you know, with such, let's say, power. You know, in the medical industry, there's a lot of regulation. In the financial industry, there's a lot of regulation. I think it's going to take a while for the government to catch up to that because of it's such an unknown area, which is where sort of more private side does take over in trying to, you know, lead by example. So I think that is the biggest thing that especially the bigger companies can do is, you know, lead by show and tell. For instance, Google, they released documentation when they was updating their models, doing things like that gives the smaller companies with less investment, less money, and less capital the ability to sort of follow suit, not just trying to play catch up and cutting corners because you have that initial example leading the front.
Okay. And then when we think about AI, it's been around for a very, very long time in a variety of different guises. You know, it's started out a long time ago, then it turned into machine learning, and now we're into the kind of Gen AI space. And when you look at what's coming forward over the next few years and the emerging technologies, what are you most excited about? What are you kind of really keen to kind of play with and get your hands dirty with?
I think for me, it'd probably be the collaboration space. Even here today, with everybody coming in, all the data enthusiasts, we've built an environment, we've built a community that's very supportive. Yes, we're all competitive. You know, there's a lot to gain from the space, but we're all enthusiasts. So everybody wants to take part, everyone wants to participate, everyone wants to show off their shiny new toy, which is really great because it will foster collaboration and it will foster innovation. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I'm looking forward to. And there's a lot of talk about moving, you know, AI from being a tool that helps us to an agent. I'm not sure how much, you know, to what extent we'll ever get there because, of course, there's many arguments across many different industries about that. But even in terms of just AI as a tool to help us, the same way cars have evolved and everything else, it will be a great, great use, great tool and great way of assisting us in maximizing human capabilities to overcome real problems that we deal with in the day-to-day.
Sounds great. Khilan, looks like you've got some
I was
burning
just
thoughts
gonna
on
say,
that.
it's really interesting as well when you go to more the specialized LLM agents as well. So say if you have like a question come through from a customer, you can first take it through to the first LLM, which could kind of do some more general analysis of the question that came through and potentially, so for example, we have a medical device review body within BSI. So you could have a chatbot that kind of potentially answers some of the initial questions. But maybe there's some areas about some specific medical device related questions, some biology related questions. There are a lot of specialized LLMs out there around that medical domain. So you could have it feed through and ask a question to the medical LLM, for example, and then return it back forwards to try and answer that customer's question. You can even have like different LLMs trying to target different audiences as well. So you could have it fine-tuned and trained to kind of give a certain type of response as well. I see that's really powerful in terms of, similar to how we work as organizations, we have specialized skill sets. You could have specialized LLMs to kind of break down some of the logic within that. I see that quite interesting.
Excellent. Marta?
I'll add to those great answers as well. Productivity enhancers, right? I mean, we're talking about like some real cool tools that Khilan and Shai mentioned, but even the day-to-day things like note-taking or scheduling meetings, anything that helps you, I don't know, project manage better or perhaps just do your administrative tasks a little bit faster. I'll actually refer to the LinkedIn's recent work trends index, and that actually showed that over 75% of the world knowledge workers use Gen AI tools in their work. But I'd say what's interesting is that people often bring their own tools to work, because unfortunately still many companies don't trust or don't even know how to invest in AI tools. But the one interesting thing around it, and the reason why I'm mentioning it, is that those individuals who are the sort of power users of AI tools, they report actually saving over 30 minutes per day thanks to using Gen AI tools. And I think that's a big win. And we're only just starting with Gen AI, right? So I'm really curious where it's going to take us.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You had a question come in from the audience that sort of touches upon this idea of sort of big business versus small business. And they've asked, how can small companies succeed in the data space despite a clear advantage of big companies in terms of resources and past experiences? Anyone got any thoughts on that one?
So, I mean, I'll start there, and I think probably everybody will have some input on that. But I think this is where AI is so interesting, because of AI tools will start to level the playing field. Mm-hmm. Let's say I'm a content creator. I can't be a specialist in multiple facets. So I'm going to use these AI tools that are going to help me, create content or write up marketing material and things like that to compete with these bigger giants. It's going to turn a single person into an army of themselves. Mm-hmm. It will help them, from organization all the way through to creation, and help just level that playing field out. Of course, this does come with the consciousness of using more public tools. Some bigger companies will have their own private tools. However, again, where it's such a competitive space, the public tools are consistently having to develop, innovate and evolve just to meet that.
Yeah. Leila, looks like you want to jump in.
I would almost flip the question, because I think you can frame it in the positive to the smaller entities. We're seeing a lot of big organizations, and this isn't just with AI and Gen AI, it's all things data. They have huge legal departments, and the risk that they have of something going wrong prevents them doing a lot of things. And even if they can do things, they're incredibly slow to do it, because the amount of control that they need to put throughout a global organization with hundreds of thousands of people versus a small entity with 1 to 10 people, you can actually just leverage tools with a license that you've got linked to a credit card, but a multinational organization can just never do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think you can almost flip it and think about it in the positive, and that actually it can be really difficult for large organizations to get any value, because there's just so much red tape that they need to get through just to be able to do anything. And I think you'd be surprised, actually. I think, I always end up talking about this, but I think AI, Gen AI, it's kind of like teenagers talking about sex. they all talk about it, but they're not really doing it. And I think smaller organizations are much more likely to be doing it. They just don't realize that they're the ones doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting a lot of questions come in around career management, recruitment, so I think we'll take it in that direction. As we see sort of AI develop and move out of the model space and into the application space, where are you seeing those kind of new roles appear that we've never seen before, and how do people start future-proofing their careers to kind of move in that direction?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So I guess, one part of the questions is what new roles will emerge. I wish I would love to be able to answer that, but it actually, funny enough, takes me back to roughly 10 years ago when I was, at that time, I was working back for EMC, a company that was providing B2B IT services, and it was the first time that I heard about data scientist positions. And everyone was like, what is that? What does it even mean? What kind of skills do we need to hire for? There were very scarce talent on the market that even had elements of data science. And I see some similarities around data science back in those days and AI and Gen AI skills. And again, I'll refer to that same LinkedIn report that I mentioned before, because it talks about the hiring for skills and skills-based hiring rather than hiring for experience and expertise. I think Gen AI really helps us to move basically fast forward towards skills-based hiring. And what we're hearing is that hiring managers are way more likely to consider a candidate that maybe has less of the like-for-like experience, but has some skills and curiosity around Gen AI tools versus someone who has the exact years of experience and the exact like-for-like job titles, for example. So basically, to future-proof your career, I would say get curious, but also practice any kind of Gen AI tools, read about the trends that are touching your industry or your types of jobs, because that will bring you, it will make you way more competitive in the job market. I'd love to touch about the soft skills. I think we might come back to this later, but that would be another topic that would be quite interesting to explore as well.
So just to add to that as well, taken from the study that BSI had actually undertaken, so with the pension age, for example, increasing, we're going to be in a multi-generational working environment now, and especially the labour force of before, there's definitely that feeling of fear in terms of AI. You're not understanding it, feeling they're going to get aged out, and especially that AI is going to take these jobs away. I think speaking earlier about flipping things on their head, one thing that I've actually seen come out of AI as well is retraining and, giving the ability to adapt training, to retrain those individuals to better jobs. Actually, at Oktoberfest last year, I met a gentleman who had retired and then came out of retirement to go into data. Said he'd wished he'd done it 20 years before, but it was actually, this data space and this environment that actually enabled him to come into a job that he said he enjoyed way more than any past experience, and it was technology that gave him that opportunity that he wouldn't have had before, and then enabled him to work in a role that actually was more fit for his now needs, his present needs, which will of course change over time.
Excellent. I've actually had a question come in about career change, so that's a nice segue in. Would you advise a career changer or school leaver to take a degree in data science in light of the rate of changes? Do you think it's something more suitable to kind of apprenticeships, degrees, hands-on experience? Do you think a degree is even necessary in this current space? What would you advise?
It's a very interesting question, and I'll actually answer it. Before I answer it, I'm going to mention no one's going to tell you what to do, what kind of degree to take. It's whatever your passions and interests are and what your why is. Like, would you take that degree just because everyone around you does that, or because you're hearing that that's what you should do? Or is it really something you're interested in? So that's where I would actually start. But to actually directly answer the question, more and more companies move away from required degree on their job descriptions. I would even say that if you're looking at a job advert and it says such and such degree required, it's a clear indication that that company is not necessarily future thinking. It's a little bit less mature when it comes to diversity, inclusion, probably future-proof type of hiring. So focusing on skills and building your portfolio of skills is going to be way more important than education. And if you think about the rate of change, by the time you do your degree, it's probably going to be, in practice, it's probably not going to even be very applicable. So I would focus on skills, definitely.
Leila, you seem to be nodding away there. Have you?
Completely agree. I mean, we basically moved away from pulling entry-level roles from universities a few years ago. So we've exclusively been hiring entry roles from either boot camps or apprenticeships. It was less actually about the rate of change and more around the fact that universities have traditionally been like quite homogenous places. I've got a university degree, but they are like, just to go to university requires you to come generally from a certain background with certain freedom, certain financial means. And actually, if we want the data and technology and STEM spaces to be representative and reflective of the world in which we're building products and solutions for, then we also have to change the way that we're pulling people into the industry. So we've been looking at multiple other streams, but now, it's hard for universities to deliver courses that can keep up. But that's not to say that you shouldn't go to university. Again, I went to university, but we have moved away from that.
I was just going to say that machine learning is a very much an applied field, so it's not like you do machine learning on its own. You have to apply it to a specific industry or a specific area or technology. You're applying the technology in a specific subject. So I even know in my previous course, they didn't have any machine learning modules, but now for the degree at University of Chemical Engineering, there are now applied machine learning courses within that modules as well. So I would say that it's just also potentially identifying universities that are moving with the times, and I think ML is going to kind of go into many different areas, and people are going to be using it in all these areas as well.
Right. I've got a couple of questions that have come in around regulation, bias, those kind of things. So I'm going to combine them because they're all much of the same theme. When we think about biases that appear within AI, and it's obviously coming out of the data, how can we account for that, and how can regulation help support and remove some of that bias? How do you see that helping the industry?
So I think that's quite an important one. Actually, there's a series on, or like a docu-series on Netflix about bias. I can't remember the exact title, but it's an extremely good watch if you want to understand a bit more about bias. And they actually they started implementing machine learning in America quite heavily in public sector, which is probably why we haven't done it over here. And some of it was the reoffence rate, for instance, or even, propensity, should we say, to commit crime. And basically, to draw it down, and sorry for the spoilers, it basically was quite a racist model. What we need to do, especially in being ethical with data, is remove the outdated features that are driven by, previous lack of diversity. If you look at sort of, the prison system and things like that, people that will be a majority. If you leave that in as a feature, the model's going to learn from those bias. So I think it's more removing that bias from yourself and then taking that accountability to the features. Of course, it will probably look more accurate initially because of it's looking at previous data, but we're not trying to think about the past because, if the world was perfect before, we wouldn't be innovating. So I think to sort of circle back to, I guess, bias and how to account for it, it is definitely, I'd say, don't be afraid to be wrong. When you're developing and things like that, document it, let people challenge it, because of many minds will help develop the better model. They'll ask you harder questions that you may not have thought about, you may not have accounted for, and it will help you make more of a truer model, or help you make more of a truer tool that can be less biased or bias-free, and then you can obviously use that and actually develop real change. I think everybody wants to develop something to help, but unfortunately, if you're too tunnel visioned, it could be more crippling than actually assistive.
Khilan, looked like you had a thought.
I was just going to say that it also potentially depends which country you're in. So I know the UK and the US is quite lax in terms of maybe defining exactly what you should be doing, but I know the EU is taking more of a prescriptive approach in terms of a risk-based approach. So looking at some of the standards that they may designate, they seem to approach like impact assessment. So looking at how you're actually going to be using your AI model, and then what are the actual impacts of saying if it goes wrong. So if you're using it in hiring, Could there be issues in terms of discrimination based on race? What's the actual effect of that? And then trying to work those through and then thinking ways to potentially mitigate those. So that's kind of how the approach is going, at least within the EU. And there are standards kind of looking at that as well.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that, absolutely, AI is not creative as such, right? It doesn't come up with anything new. It uses the data that's pre-existing and learns from it. So if we think about hiring or any kind of important people decisions within each company, if we allow AI to make decisions, then I think that's an error in itself. AI should be used to support those decisions. And ideally, maybe once it's a bit more evolved, maybe more trained, so that it goes beyond those original bias in the data, then it can enable us to see what's a better, more neutral feed into or information into making this decision. And absolutely, it's a human being that should be making a decision. But also from a more practical perspective, if you're a hiring manager or if you're involved in hiring decisions, make sure that you speak to your recruitment department and find out what tools are they using and what information are they feeding into those tools, what questions are being asked, or how does AI scan CVs or application data to ensure that there is no bias. And then if you're a candidate, for example, even building your CV that is friendly towards those automation or AI tools, making sure that keywords are present in the job advert that you're actually applying for, but also making sure that you remove any data that might present opportunity for bias, or I should say danger for bias. Things like, for example, dates on your education that might relate to potentially age bias, maybe your nationality, a photograph, anything that might relate to AI making maybe gender-based or ethnicity-based or age-based decisions. So that's how you can perhaps prevent those decisions being made if there is the danger for bias.
Yeah, and I think when we think about bias, it's a twofold thing. One, we have to remove it from the data, but to solve that data problem, we need to remove it from wherever it's coming from in the first place. And I always see a big part of that is making sure that we have adequate diversity across the team. How can we make sure that we're getting diverse candidates into companies and businesses and organizations to, one, identify the bias, but also help remove it?
I mean, I would start with just being aware of biases, right? Because we're talking about biases. Is there something wrong or something bad? No, they're not. They're not inherently negative. It's just mechanisms that we have through evolution to deal with the world around us. But it's the awareness of how those biases impact and influence our decisions. People-related decisions, career development, succession planning, promotion decisions, but also job change and career change decisions. So I think education is key, awareness is key, and that will definitely help, be it through AI or even if your company doesn't use AI. I think awareness is the most important thing, and that's where I would start.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing a few questions come in around job creation, job loss. Do you think there'll be more jobs created than lost by Gen AI? Leila, do you want to jump in and start with that one? You're looking a bit bewildered.
I guess it's how long's a piece of string. I go down kind of tangents where I just get down these little, loops of thoughts about what's going to happen with AI and Gen AI. Look, jobs are going to go, that's for sure, but there's also going to be jobs that come. It's a revolution. A lot of people talk about it as the next industrial revolution. Similarly with past iterations and things like that, people lost their jobs and other jobs were created. I think in this instance, there's a definite need to think about how we retrain people that will ultimately lose their jobs. And there's also a lot of work that needs to be done around kind of what are the new jobs of the future and what shouldn't be kind of AI-based roles, where should it always be humans. I do, though, think with that kind of spin on it, there's a huge amount of opportunity that can come. One of the big things, and I think this week's releases were really touched on this, is that the next iterations of kind of artificial intelligence have the ability to level the playing field in a lot of perspectives. So if we think about the access to education, the access to information, AI is now helping to kind of make things available to people all throughout the world that perhaps those types of things weren't available. And so there's going to be a whole new job market and markets around the world that are going to require kind of things and trades and work and all sorts of things. So I think we just need to think about it not in a literal, what have we got now versus what's going to go, but, you know, what amazing big things are going to be coming that's going to create all these other opportunities, and think creatively as opposed to literally about it.
I would also just add, again, think about it, you know, from your perspective, from employees, candidates' perspective. So I would probably challenge you to think about your jobs not as job titles, but actually tasks, set of tasks. And then isolate those tasks that could be enhanced or replaced potentially by AI, and then focus upon those that may not be replaced by AI, that are a bit more human-centric, like, you know, the soft skills. I don't actually like to say soft skills because there's nothing soft about them. I would like to call them core skills, critical skills, right? So things like leadership, things like management, things like relating to each other, collaborating, right? Shai, you mentioned opportunities around collaboration. These are the areas where AI is highly unlikely to replace us. And I'm saying highly unlikely because who knows what's going to happen in, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 years. But these are the human-centric skills where you can make a difference, and then use AI in those replaceable tasks to actually help with your productivity and help with your career.
Right, great. We're coming towards the last few minutes, and I wanted to kind of end on some more positive questions. Where do you see AI being leveraged to promote social good and inclusivity?
So I'll actually refer to bias. We talked about bias and, you know, the dangers of bias. But I think it's only a matter of time where AI, again, will evolve, will be trained enough that those decisions will be more neutral. You know, Leila mentioned about equality, and I think AI is probably that missing link that we didn't have up until now in all of this work around diversity, inclusion, belonging. So we're suddenly going to see the barriers, the traditional barriers to careers removed. And as we speak, people will be able to apply to jobs that maybe were not available for them before, but because they didn't have access to universities, or they didn't have access to specific types of jobs, or even certain years of experience. Now the skill set level is going to be way more important than your experience level. And I mentioned before, you know, hiring for skills that really removes barriers in terms of gender equality, in terms of, you know, age equality, ethnicity, backgrounds, you name it, neurodiversity even, right? A big topic, and that's where AI can play a huge role. So I am personally extremely excited about it from, you know, the recruitment point of view and career development point of view.
So I think another big part of AI that I guess isn't touched on enough is that in terms of social inclusivity, we'll be able to market in a more targeted way to a more diverse audience. For instance, you know, it's a big thing about red brick universities and the job opportunities that they have, and they're a lot more targeted in helping their uni students get that outreach into internship programs and school and leaver programs into jobs. Now, from an employer perspective, you want to reach all pools of talent to bring in just the best talent and the one that fits, you know, fits best into your workplace. Through AI, they'll be able to maybe segment and target the market better to reach a much wider and more diverse audience in a way bigger variety of, you know, in terms of how they're going to target or the content they're going to deliver, which means that they'll be able to draw in a better audience of applicants and maybe a better fit than they previously would have had. And that will just open them up to a much, you know, that will enhance inclusivity, that will enhance diversity, because of the applicants will actually be seeing these jobs being posted, as opposed to only specific people getting access to these jobs. Everybody will actually be able to see them in a much better way.
Fantastic. Getting to the last question, I'm going to ask for your final thoughts. When I think of applications of AI across all of the different industries that are out there, where are you most excited? Where do you think that we're going to see the biggest inroads and the biggest change for good? Which way do we want to go, this way or that way?
I would just say for me, it's just the things that AI could enable. So on my side, I'm viewing it from the data scientist perspective. It's just the data we could capture during every single process. So even, for example, say if you have a GP consult, you could potentially capture additional data during that consultation that the doctor themselves might have missed. For example, BSI also deliver audits, so during the audits themselves, you can capture additional information that can then kind of feed through and can utilize as features for those models. But again, that's from a very like data-centric perspective.
Bit broader. I'm going to say education. I think education has the power to lift communities. It has the power to get women out of very difficult situations. It has the power to change countries' economies. I think AI has now got the potential to give a fantastic standard of education to absolutely everyone in the world, and not just to those that can pay for it or those that are fortunate enough to live in countries and suburbs that have fantastic schools. So I can't wait for 20 years from now to see what the next generation of the world actually looks like with that level of education.
Marta.
I would actually say accelerating careers. We talked about those barriers being removed, and I genuinely see that AI will enable us to focus a bit more on developing us rather than just developing the skills for the jobs, and different jobs being suddenly accessible to much broader crowd of people, because a lot of the tasks will be done by AI, a lot of the tasks will be automated, so suddenly you will have to have less of that really specific technical knowledge. So types of careers that you haven't really thought of are suddenly going to become available to you. So I am extremely excited about that.
Jay.
I think for me, I'm most excited about the sociality. I think AI is a big enhancer, and if we use it as an enhancement tool, it will go into so many different things. So I think, making wide audiences understand culture from, a global perspective, they'll be able to dive into multiple different people's cultures. Education, like you touched on as well, and I think the biggest part is adaptability. A lot of things are built, for instance, even like our sewage system is built for Britain. If you tried to take it anywhere else, it probably wouldn't work. With the adaptability that AI or artificial intelligence will give us, that will mean that we can create environments that are actually more adaptable for everybody. Instead of having one fit and it has to fit everybody, we will adapt this fit to make it perfect for everyone. For instance, augmented reality, if we can enhance that, it will make a much more inclusive, a much more powerful teaching experience. Because imagine if you're having a history lesson and then you can actually see it fit to your room or to any space, and you can do that with anything. So I think, and using AI as a tool to enhance will greatly affect sociality and how social growth globally.
Amazing. Really interesting final thoughts there. Thanks for the panel, guys. I've really enjoyed this afternoon's discussion. And thanks for the audience for coming and listening. It was really great.
All right. So we're feel free to go downstairs for a break. We're back on at 3:15 and looking forward to seeing everyone then. Don't forget about the competition at the popcorn machine.